You've been eating fruit that's older than civilization itself, and you probably had no idea. While we're obsessing over the latest superfood trends and exotic imports, some of the most common fruits in your kitchen have been feeding humans for thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of years. These botanical time travelers have survived ice ages, droughts, wars, and the rise and fall of entire civilizations, and they're still showing up in your fruit bowl like nothing happened. Number 15. Apples. Let's start with something that seems completely ordinary but is actually an ancient miracle: the apple. These crunchy globes of deliciousness have been feeding humans for over 4,000 years, originating in the mountains of Kazakhstan, where wild apple forests still grow today. That's right. While your ancestors were just figuring out how to make bronze tools, apples were already perfected and ready for snacking. Here's what's absolutely mind-blowing about apples. They don't breed true from seed, which means every single apple variety we eat today is essentially a clone kept alive through grafting. Ancient peoples figured out this complex horticultural technique thousands of years ago, creating an agricultural revolution that's still feeding us today. They were basically doing genetic engineering with Stone Age tools. The ancient Greeks and Romans were absolutely obsessed with apples, considering them symbols of love and fertility. They had dozens of varieties, many of which have been lost to time, but some Roman apple varieties are still grown today. Imagine eating the exact same fruit that Julius Caesar might have enjoyed. That's not just food, that's edible history. What makes apples truly remarkable is their incredible diversity. There are over 7,500 known apple varieties worldwide, created over millennia by countless farmers selecting the best traits. From tiny crab apples to massive pumpkin-sized varieties, humans have been customizing apples for flavor, storage, and growing conditions for thousands of years. It's like having a fruit that's been beta-tested by 4,000 years of human experience. The phrase, "an apple a day keeps the doctor away," isn't just marketing, it's ancient wisdom backed by modern science. Apples are packed with fiber, antioxidants, and compounds that support heart health and digestion. Our ancestors might not have understood the science, but they knew apples were good medicine, and they've been prescribing them for millennia. Number 14. Grapes. Grapes are basically time machines that you can eat, with archaeological evidence showing that humans have been cultivating them for over 8,000 years. These little purple and green orbs aren't just fruit, they're liquid history, fermented culture, and the foundation of civilizations all rolled into one convenient cluster. The ancient Egyptians were so obsessed with grapes that they painted them on tomb walls and buried pharaohs with wine for the afterlife. That's not just appreciation. That's believing grapes are so essential that you need them in the next dimension. Egyptian hieroglyphs from 4,000 years ago show detailed winemaking processes that are still used today, proving that some things really don't need improvement. What's absolutely incredible about grapes is their dual nature as both fresh fruit and wine. Ancient peoples discovered that grapes naturally ferment due to wild yeasts on their skins, creating alcohol that was safer to drink than water in many ancient cities. Grapes literally helped keep our ancestors alive by providing both nutrition and safe hydration. They were the original superfood and water purification system combined. The Romans took grape cultivation to insane levels, developing hundreds of varieties and creating winemaking techniques so advanced that we're still using them today. They planted vineyards across their empire from Britain to North Africa, spreading grape culture throughout the known world. Roman soldiers received wine rations, meaning grapes helped conquer half the planet. Modern grapes are descended from these ancient varieties, and some European vineyards have been continuously operated for over 1,000 years. When you drink wine from regions like Burgundy or Champagne, you're literally tasting the culmination of centuries of human expertise and agricultural evolution. It's like drinking liquid archaeology. Number 13. Figs. Figs are so ancient that they're mentioned in religious texts as symbols of prosperity and peace, and they've been feeding humans for over 11,000 years. These sweet, seedy fruits were among the first plants domesticated by humans, predating wheat and barley by thousands of years. That means figs were keeping people fed before agriculture was even invented. Archaeological evidence from the Jordan Valley shows that humans were cultivating figs 11,400 years ago. making them potentially the first domesticated crop in human history. Think about that. While your ancestors were still hunter-gatherers, they were already smart enough to figure out fig farming. They literally invented agriculture by accident while trying to get more figs. What makes figs absolutely fascinating is their bizarre pollination system that requires a specific species of wasp. Ancient peoples had no idea about this complex relationship, but they somehow figured out how to propagate figs through cuttings, bypassing the whole wasp situation entirely. They were solving complex botanical puzzles without understanding the science behind them. Figs were so valuable in ancient times that they were often used as currency and tribute payments. Roman law actually made it illegal to export figs from Italy because they were considered too valuable to share with other countries. Imagine a fruit so delicious that governments made it classified information. That's the power of figs. The ancient Greeks believed figs were a gift from the gods and used them to feed Olympic athletes. Spartan warriors carried dried figs as battle rations, and Athenian philosophers wrote about them as brain food. Modern science has proven that figs are indeed nutritional powerhouses, packed with fiber, potassium, and antioxidants. Ancient wisdom, meet modern validation. Number 12. Dates. Dates are basically nature's candy that's been sweetening human life for over 5,000 years. Originating in the Middle East, where they're still called the tree of life. These chewy, intensely sweet fruits sustained entire civilizations in desert regions where other crops couldn't survive, making them literally life-saving food for our ancestors. The ancient Mesopotamians were so dependent on dates that they created laws specifically protecting date palm trees. Cutting down someone else's date palm was punishable by death, which tells you everything you need to know about how valuable these trees were. They weren't just fruit trees, they were survival infrastructure in human form. What's absolutely incredible about date palms is their productivity and longevity. A single mature tree can produce 150 to 300 pounds of dates per year for over 100 years. Ancient peoples essentially planted date palms as retirement plans for their great-grandchildren. These trees are so long-lived that some date palms planted by ancient civilizations are still producing fruit today. Dates were the ultimate ancient superfood, packed with natural sugars, fiber, and minerals that provided quick energy and sustained nutrition. Desert travelers relied on dates for long journeys because they're naturally preserved and incredibly nutrient-dense. They were like ancient energy bars that grew on trees and lasted for months without refrigeration. The biblical and Quranic references to dates aren't just poetic. They reflect the genuine importance of this fruit in ancient Middle Eastern cultures. Dates were offered to honored guests, used in religious ceremonies, and considered symbols of fertility and abundance. When ancient texts talk about lands flowing with milk and honey, they often meant lands where date palms grew abundantly. Number 11. Pomegranates. Pomegranates are basically ancient grenades filled with ruby red seeds instead of explosives, and they've been exploding with flavor in human diets for over 3,000 years. These crown-topped fruits originated in Persia and quickly spread throughout the ancient world, becoming symbols of fertility, abundance, and eternal life in countless cultures. The ancient Persians were so obsessed with pomegranates that they considered them royal fruit, reserved for kings and nobles. Persian carpets from thousands of years ago feature pomegranate motifs, and Persian poetry is filled with pomegranate metaphors. They basically made pomegranates the unofficial mascot of their civilization. What makes pomegranates absolutely fascinating is their incredible symbolism across cultures. Ancient Greeks associated them with Persephone and the underworld. Jews included them in temple decorations, and early Christians saw them as symbols of resurrection. No other fruit has been adopted by so many different cultures as a sacred symbol. Pomegranates are basically the universal language of ancient spirituality. The ancient Egyptians were buried with pomegranates for the afterlife, and Egyptian tomb paintings show detailed scenes of pomegranate harvesting. They understood that pomegranates were special. Modern science has proven that pomegranates are packed with antioxidants and compounds that support heart health and longevity. Ancient peoples might not have known about antioxidants, but they knew pomegranates were life-extending medicine. Here's what's really wild about pomegranates. They're one of the few fruits that actually improve with age. The seeds can be dried and stored for months, and pomegranate molasses, concentrated pomegranate juice, was used as both food and medicine in ancient times. They created shelf-stable superfoods thousands of years before we invented food preservation technology. Number 10. Olives. Olives are technically fruits, not vegetables, and they've been feeding and healing humans for over 6,000 years. These bitter little ovals transformed the entire Mediterranean region, creating trade networks, supporting civilizations, and literally lighting the ancient world with their oil. Without olives, Western civilization as we know it might never have existed. The ancient Greeks were so devoted to olives that they made olive branches symbols of peace and victory. Olympic champions were crowned with olive wreaths, and olive oil was used to anoint kings and athletes. The Greeks believed olive trees were gifts from the goddess Athena, and they weren't wrong. Olives basically built their entire economy and culture. What's absolutely mind-blowing about olives is their processing requirements. Raw olives are incredibly bitter and basically inedible due to compounds called oleuropeins. Ancient people somehow figured out complex curing processes involving salt, water, and time to make olives palatable. They invented food processing techniques that we still use today, all to unlock the potential of this bitter fruit. Ancient olive trees are some of the longest-lived fruit trees on Earth, with some specimens in the Mediterranean still producing fruit after 1,000+ years. There are olive trees in Greece that were already ancient when the Parthenon was built. These trees have literally watched the rise and fall of empires while continuing to produce fruit. They're living historical monuments that you can eat from. The olive oil trade created the first international economy, with ancient merchants shipping olive oil from Spain to India. Olive oil was so valuable that it was used as currency, medicine, and fuel for lamps. Ancient peoples understood that olives weren't just food, they were liquid gold that could power civilization. Number 9. Citrons. Citrons are like the grandfather of all citrus fruits, and they've been making life more flavorful for over 3,000 years. These football-sized, thick-skinned fruits were the first citrus to reach the Mediterranean from their native India and China, paving the way for all the lemons, limes, and oranges we take for granted today. The ancient Jews adopted citrons as one of the 4 species used in religious ceremonies, and perfect citrons became incredibly valuable for ritual purposes. Some religious citrons today sell for hundreds of dollars each, making them among the most expensive fruits in the world. Imagine a fruit so spiritually significant that people pay more for it than some people make in a month. What makes citrons absolutely unique is that they're mostly rind with very little juice or pulp. Ancient peoples weren't eating citrons for the fruit. They were using the incredibly fragrant, thick peel for medicine, perfume, and flavoring. They basically figured out that the wrapper was more valuable than the contents, which is pretty advanced thinking for ancient times. Ancient Chinese and Indian texts describe citrons as medicine for everything from digestive problems to respiratory issues. Traditional Chinese medicine still uses citron peel as an important therapeutic ingredient. Modern science has validated many of these ancient uses, finding that citron peels contain powerful compounds with anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties. The Romans were so fascinated by citrons that they carved them into architectural decorations and mosaics. Roman banquets featured candied citron peels as exotic delicacies, and wealthy Romans competed to serve the most perfect citrons to their guests. They turned fruit into a status symbol and art form simultaneously. Number 8. Melons. Melons have been cooling down hot summer days for over 4,000 years, originating in Africa and spreading throughout the ancient world as the ultimate refreshing fruit. These water-filled spheres weren't just snacks. They were portable hydration systems that helped ancient people survive in hot climates long before air conditioning or refrigeration. Ancient Egyptians were absolutely obsessed with melons, painting them on tomb walls and including them in burial goods for the afterlife. Egyptian hieroglyphs show detailed melon cultivation techniques, and archaeologists have found 4,000-year-old melon seeds in Egyptian tombs. They literally believed melons were important enough to take to the next world. What's fascinating about ancient melons is their incredible diversity. Archaeological evidence shows that ancient peoples cultivated dozens of melon varieties, from tiny bitter melons to massive sweet watermelons. They were basically running ancient plant breeding programs, selecting for size, sweetness, and storage capability thousands of years before we understood genetics. Roman soldiers received melon rations during long marches in hot climates, because melons provided both nutrition and hydration in one convenient package. Ancient military commanders understood that melons weren't just food, they were tactical advantages that could keep armies functioning in desert conditions. They were fighting wars with fruit as weapons. The ancient Persian and Arabic cultures elevated melon growing to an art form, developing techniques for growing perfect melons that are still used today. Persian poets wrote odes to melons, and Arabic agricultural texts from 1,000 years ago contain melon-growing advice that modern farmers still follow. They created melon perfection that has never been improved upon. Number 7. Cherries. Cherries are basically nature's candy that's been making humans happy for over 2,000 years, though wild cherries have been feeding people for much longer. These perfect little red and black orbs originated in Asia Minor and were so beloved by ancient peoples that they spread them throughout their empires wherever the climate would support them. The ancient Romans were cherry fanatics, and Roman general Lucullus is credited with bringing the first cultivated cherries to Rome from Turkey around 72 BCE. The Romans were so excited about cherries that they planted them throughout their empire, from Britain to North Africa. They literally conquered territories and then improved them by planting cherry trees. That's dedication to fruit. What makes cherries absolutely special is their brief but intense season that creates a sense of urgency and celebration. Ancient peoples understood that cherries were a fleeting gift that had to be enjoyed immediately or preserved quickly. This created cherry festivals and preservation techniques that are still practiced today. Humans have been throwing cherry parties for thousands of years. Ancient Chinese texts describe cherries as symbols of beauty and the fleeting nature of life, which is pretty deep thinking for a small fruit. Japanese cherry blossoms became cultural obsessions not just for their beauty, but because they represented the brief, precious nature of perfect moments. Cherries taught ancient peoples to appreciate temporary perfection. The preservation of cherries led to some of humanity's first advanced food processing techniques. Ancient peoples figured out how to dry cherries, make cherry wine, and create cherry preserves that could last through winter. They were solving food security problems with fruit technology thousands of years before we had refrigerators. Number 6. Pears. Pears are basically the sophisticated cousins of apples, and they've been providing buttery, sweet perfection to human diets for over 3,000 years. These delicate fruits originated in China and Central Asia, spreading slowly westward as ancient peoples figured out their complex growing and ripening requirements. What makes pears absolutely fascinating is their unique ripening process. They ripen from the inside out, which means they can go from perfect to overripe in a matter of hours. Ancient peoples somehow figured out this tricky timing without modern understanding of fruit physiology. They developed pear expertise through thousands of years of trial and error, creating knowledge that we still rely on today. The ancient Chinese elevated pear growing to an art form, developing dozens of varieties and techniques for producing perfect pears. Chinese agricultural texts from over 2,000 years ago contain pear-growing advice that's still followed by modern orchardists. They created pear perfection through generations of careful observation and selection. Ancient Greeks and Romans adopted pears enthusiastically, with Roman writer Pliny the Elder describing 36 different pear varieties grown in the Roman Empire. They understood that pears weren't just fruit. They were luxury food that required skill and patience to grow and consume properly. Pears were the original gourmet fruit. The texture and flavor of pears made them perfect for ancient preservation techniques. Dried pears, pear wine, and pear preserves were staples in ancient diets, providing sweetness and nutrition during winter months. Ancient peoples figured out how to capture pear perfection and make it last through seasons when fresh fruit wasn't available. Number 5. Peaches. Peaches are fuzzy spheres of pure summer happiness that have been making humans smile for over 4,000 years. Despite being called Persian apples by ancient Greeks and Romans, peaches actually originated in China, where they were considered symbols of immortality and divine favor. Ancient Chinese emperors planted peach orchards believing the fruit would grant eternal life. The ancient Chinese weren't just growing peaches, they were creating peach culture. Chinese art from thousands of years ago features peach motifs. Chinese literature is filled with peach metaphors, and Chinese mythology includes magical peach trees that produce immortality fruit every 3,000 years. They turned a fuzzy fruit into a cultural obsession that lasted millennia. What's absolutely incredible about peaches is how they spread along the Silk Road, traveling from China to Persia to Greece to Rome, adapting to new climates and cultures along the way. Each civilization that encountered peaches fell in love with them and developed their own varieties and growing techniques. Peaches were like delicious ambassadors spreading sweetness across continents. Ancient Persians were so devoted to peaches that they developed irrigation systems specifically for peach orchards. Persian gardens featured peaches as centerpiece trees, and Persian poets wrote about peaches as symbols of beauty and perfection. They created the concept of peaches as luxury fruit that we still maintain today. The Romans took peach cultivation to industrial levels, developing techniques for growing peaches in climates where they shouldn't survive, and creating preservation methods that extended peach season. Roman banquets featured elaborate peach desserts, and wealthy Romans competed to serve the most perfect peaches to their guests. They turned fruit into competitive sport. Number 4. Plums. Plums are like nature's jewels that have been adorning human diets for over 2,000 years. Though wild plums fed our ancestors for much longer. These smooth-skinned fruits come in an incredible array of colors and sizes, from tiny wild plums to massive Japanese varieties, representing thousands of years of human selection and cultivation. What makes plums absolutely remarkable is their incredible diversity. There are over 40 species of plums, and hundreds of varieties developed by ancient peoples across different continents. European plums, Asian plums, and American plums were all domesticated independently by different cultures, proving that humans everywhere recognized the potential of these sweet, colorful fruits. Ancient Romans were plum fanatics, developing dozens of varieties and techniques for growing perfect plums. Roman agricultural writer Columella described detailed plum cultivation methods that are still used today. They understood that plums weren't just seasonal treats. They were valuable crops that could be dried into prunes for year-round nutrition. The ancient art of plum drying created one of humanity's first concentrated superfoods. Prunes, dried plums, provided concentrated nutrition, natural sweetness, and digestive benefits that sustained ancient peoples through long winters and difficult times. They figured out how to transform perishable fruit into shelf-stable nutrition. Thousands of years before modern food processing, Japanese and Chinese cultures elevated plum appreciation to spiritual levels, with plum blossoms becoming symbols of perseverance and hope. Ancient Asian art features plum motifs extensively, and traditional Asian medicine uses various parts of plum trees for therapeutic purposes. They understood that plums offered both physical and spiritual nourishment. Number 3. Quinces. Quinces are basically the forgotten ancestors of apples and pears, and they've been providing golden, aromatic goodness to human diets for over 4,000 years. These hard, fragrant fruits can't be eaten raw, but when cooked, they transform into sweet, rose-colored perfection that ancient peoples considered the ultimate luxury food. The ancient Greeks and Romans were absolutely obsessed with quinces, considering them sacred to Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Greek wedding ceremonies traditionally featured quinces, and Roman poets wrote about quinces as symbols of fertility and happiness. They weren't just eating quinces, they were using them to celebrate life's most important moments. What makes quinces absolutely fascinating is their transformation through cooking. Raw quinces are hard, astringent, and basically inedible, but cooking turns them into sweet, aromatic, rose-colored delicacies with incredible flavor and fragrance. Ancient peoples figured out this magical transformation and created some of humanity's first sophisticated cooking techniques around quinces. The ancient Persian and Arabic cultures created quince preservation techniques that are still used today. Quince paste, quince jelly, and quince wine were luxury items in ancient markets, often more valuable than gold by weight. They understood that quinces weren't just fruit, they were raw materials for creating preserved luxury foods. Quinces were so important in ancient times that they appear in religious texts and mythological stories. Some scholars believe that the apple in the Garden of Eden was actually a quince. And ancient Greek mythology describes golden quinces as prizes for gods and heroes. They elevated fruit to mythological status based on pure deliciousness. Number 2. Bananas. Bananas are curved bundles of potassium-powered perfection that have been fueling human civilization for over 7,000 years. These yellow crescents originated in Southeast Asia and Papua New Guinea, spreading throughout the tropical world as ancient peoples recognized their incredible nutritional value and convenience as natural fast food. What's absolutely mind-blowing about bananas is that they're technically berries, and the bananas we eat today are completely different from ancient bananas. Wild bananas were small, hard, and filled with large seeds, but ancient people somehow figured out how to propagate seedless varieties through complex horticultural techniques thousands of years before we understood plant genetics. Ancient Southeast Asian cultures weren't just eating bananas, they were using every part of the banana plant. Banana leaves became natural plates and food wrapping. Banana fibers were woven into textiles, and banana trunks were used for construction. They created zero-waste banana technology that modern sustainability experts are still trying to match. The spread of bananas throughout the ancient world required incredible agricultural innovation. Ancient peoples had to figure out how to transport banana plants across oceans and adapt them to new climates, without losing their desirable characteristics. They were essentially running international agricultural development programs using Stone Age technology. Bananas were so valuable in ancient trade networks that they became symbols of wealth and hospitality. Ancient texts describe elaborate banana presentations at royal banquets, and archaeological evidence shows that bananas were among the first fruits traded across continents. They were creating global banana commerce thousands of years before modern international trade. Number 1. Coconuts. And for our number 1 ancient fruit that's still feeding the world today, we have coconuts. Nature's ultimate survival packages that have been sustaining human life for over 3,000 years. These hairy brown orbs aren't just fruits. They're complete survival systems containing water, food, oil, fiber, and building materials all in one convenient, naturally sealed package. What makes coconuts absolutely incredible is their ability to survive ocean crossings, allowing them to spread naturally throughout tropical regions, while also being deliberately transported by ancient peoples across vast distances. Coconut palms literally rafted themselves across oceans. Then humans helped them colonize every suitable tropical coastline on Earth. Ancient Polynesian cultures built their entire maritime civilization around coconuts, using coconut fiber for rope, coconut shells for tools and containers, coconut oil for cooking and preservation, and coconut water for hydration during long ocean voyages. They weren't just eating coconuts, they were using them to explore and colonize the Pacific Ocean. The Sanskrit name for coconut palm translates to tree which gives all that is necessary for living, which pretty much sums up why coconuts have been so important to human survival. Ancient Indian texts describe dozens of uses for every part of the coconut palm, from food and medicine to construction materials and ceremonial items. Modern science has validated what ancient peoples knew intuitively. Coconuts are nutritional and functional powerhouses containing healthy fats, electrolytes, and compounds with antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties. Ancient cultures that built their diets around coconuts developed some of the healthiest traditional eating patterns ever documented. These ancient fruits are a reminder that long before grocery stores and shipping trucks, people still found ways to eat well, stay healthy, and pass knowledge forward through plants that could survive anything. The fact that they're still around today says something, not just about survival, but about how deeply food is tied to human history. If you want to keep learning about forgotten foods, hit subscribe.